Today we're talking about the absolute value of posture. I feel like my 6th grade geometry teacher, Mr. Harrison, shout out to you, would be very proud that I'm talking about absolute paid up, and we want to think about creating space. Probably sit, swing the weight around, do this little foot, and we think of a bunion having a little kick, right? So let's go back and explain absolute value for anybody that isn't up to snuff on their geometry. You remember absolute value was the movement away from zero on an axis, right? So that's what absolute value means, is we have no negative value because we're just looking at the movement, right? So when I started thinking about all these questions we get in the office of, hey, is this posture bad? How do I improve my posture? Is this posture leading to this injury or pain? Yeah, we can look at the research for sure, and most of the research actually points to the fact that posture is not highly correlated and probably, I hate to say, probably not causative, but not a high correlation between that causing pain and injury. So what we need to start saying is, okay, why do I adapt a new posture? And I think it has to do with the absolute value of that. So what do I mean? So zero on an axis is not positive or negative, right? So there, zero is neutral. Well, so is any position. So if I'm moving away from 3 on the axis, 2 steps forward or 2 steps back, it's 2 is the absolute value because I've moved 2 one direction or the other. So think about movement in this term. So let's say I'm talking about thoracic extension. So this is my 0. I could flex forward, and let's just use axis or linear movement, 3 segments. I could move back 3 segments, and I have my 0 point. Neither one of those is negative or positive. And we can throw in these fun little pain education tidbits. Posture is not negative or positive. It's just a thing. It's a position that we adapt to because our body and our nervous system thinks it's best. Why would it think it's best? Because humans are feedback-driven beasts. To be able to create our perception of our reality, we have to have input. We have massive amounts of input coming in from a multitude of signaling responses to our body. The 5 normal senses, a couple extra sensory perceptions, not like ESPN, but so we have sound, we have sight, we have touch. When we break down touch, we have interoception, mechanoreception, proprioception. We have a lot of stuff going on, even stuff that we may not fully understand yet, especially when we talk about fascia. So if I'm a feedback-seeking machine, and let's say I sat at a desk for 30 years, we may start to be under the assumption that I am evolving and adapting to the position that is the most efficient for me as a human. True, but let's think about it a little bit different. So if somebody comes in and they say, I want to improve my posture, how well do you think it works to just say, well, sit up straight? It doesn't work, right? People have to remind themselves constantly. So we're talking about habits here, and habits are housed in a part of the brain that is not well correlated with frontal lobe connection, right? Frontal lobe's what's kind of running about 2% of our day, where we make all of our upfront cognitive decisions. All of the rest of that kind of hindbrain, the things that are running the subconscious, is a big part of what habits are tied into. So if we think we're going to change, something is ingrained as my neutral or static posture by thinking about it, you're probably not going to do so well. And then we have to ask the real question, why are you adapting to that position? Well, you could say, well, it's what I do. I sit in a chair, I work at a desk, I'm a gymnast, so I adapt to this extended position. I don't think so. We're missing the 5 whys of the Toyota equation, right? We need to think a lack of movement equals a new 0. So let's say, go back to the thoracic flexion extension example. Instead of 3 segments forward, what if I can only move 1? But then what if backwards I have 0? What is my super adaptable, feedback-driven, trying to perceive what's going on around me, reality, I have no clue what's going on, brain gonna say? I want a new 0. And my new 0 is gonna be what? Here, because now what do I got? I got at least 1 segment of movement into extension, or degrees, whatever we're talking about here. We're just using linear axis for this kind of analogy. So now I have movement, and what's my body and my brain and my nervous system get? The same experience. We're habit-driven creatures. We want the same thing. We need some framework of, I understand my existence in this realm. We're not going to get too deep talking about absolute value of posture, right? But if I'm lacking movement, how do I improve posture, right? This little tiny bit up here is the question we get all the time, which really doesn't matter, but it says how to really change posture. Oh, we need to think, okay, why is this happening in the first place? And if you think about the term zeroing in, we use it all the time, like a scope for hunting. We talk about zeroing in the scope, which it looks a lot like this. Well, zeroing in for the body comes down to, how do I move? Can I improve movement? If I want my posture to be correct, and those are big air quotes, because what is correct? Again, there's no negative or positive delineation when we're talking about posture. It's just the thing. So what we want to say is, how do I zero in? You got to work on movement. So all this fancy stuff means stop telling your kid to sit up straight, right? I'm not denying that them going into this fetal text position to be on their phone all day is not I hate to say negative and label it, is not leading to them being stiff into extension. But instead of saying sit up straight, why don't we say, hey, get off your phone and do 15 minutes of work on extension and rotation through your thoracic spine, and then you'll probably be more apt to find a new net neutral, a new absolute value, a new posture, because you can move better into the positions that you never move, and now your brain's like, man, this just kind of feels normal, versus this feeling normal because I lack so much extension. We could use this with anything. We could use it with a toe touch. We could use it, really important one to talk about is ankle dorsiflexion, right? So a lot of people, I don't know how many times I've seen on the interwebs, anterior pelvic tilt is a diagnosis. Let's say this. That's not a diagnosis. It's a position, it's a posture, it's not negative or positive, it's just a position. It does not equate to other things. We could start to spin that yarn, but that's not proven, and why not? Because let's talk about dorsiflexion, how anterior pelvic tilt is related. If I'm wearing high heels, not that I ever have, but if I was wearing high heels, that puts me in anterior pelvic tilt. That's why ladies tend to want to wear those, or anybody that wants to wear them. Because I get this anterior pelvic tilt, my booty gets stuck out, here I go, I look good, I'm going out on the town. Well, what's my foot not able to do? Not able to go into dorsiflexion. Well, what can I do better if I usually elevate my heel? Squat. What do you actually need to squat? Dorsiflexion. So let's think about this for a second. If I can't get into dorsiflexion because I'm in an elevated platform, but I can squat better, what do we think's the problem in the first place? You'd say, well, it's your ankle. Well, what if it's not? What if it's feedback around my lumbopelvic thing, right? This whole bunch of joints and a complex, which we're going to talk about zeroing in a little bit more here in a second. What if I have a poor feedback mechanism here because I sit on my butt all day? I have lack of movement through my lumbopelvic L5, S1 area. My hips are stiff as all get out, and pretty soon your body says, you know what? I'd rather feel like I'm wearing high heels because that's more functional, right? Just like lifting your heels, wearing the high heels makes your squat seem more functional, but it's really not. You're compensating. So again, zeroing in, last thing I want to say here, we're working on absolute value to find a new zero, right? To move our zero back to center or move it overall. Let's say I've had a joint replacement and I'm not going to get this full range of motion. Well, my zero is going to be over here now. I can still have an absolute value that's somewhat the same moving around that joint. But what we want to think too is absolute value. If I'm saying, hey, you got to get more motion in your thoracic spine because that's going to improve your spinal position, absolute value posture. Maybe not. We also got to think global and not just local. And we just use that example of looking at the ankle and the pelvis. So I hope that makes sense. It makes sense in my head, but I think it's a good analogy. Use it with your patients if you are a patient. If you have this conversation and somebody's telling you to sit up straight, think about this, they put you on a postural scan that kind of looks like this, and you stand and they're like, look at the improvement we had. You're not changing posture, you're changing movement. See you guys.